If we're talking about legal analysis on cable news, it's almost impossible not to mention Andrew Napolitano. For years, he was a regular face on Fox News, appearing night after night as the network's most recognizable legal analyst until one day he was gone. What many viewers don't realize is that his exit wasn't the result of a single incident, rather a long series of clashes between a fiercely libertarian jurist and an ever-evolving media giant. This is the full story of what really happened behind the scenes and why Andrew Napolitano ultimately disappeared from Fox News. Andrew Peter Napolitano, widely known on television simply as The Judge, is a retired jurist, columnist, and constitutional scholar known for his libertarian philosophy and outspoken criticism of U.S. presidents across party lines, including George W. Bush, Barack Obama, and Donald Trump. He served as the youngest judge on the New Jersey Superior Court from 1987 to 1995. Presiding over more than 160 jury trials. Over the course of his career, he made more than 14,500 media appearances and spent roughly 24 years as a Fox News contributor. Today, he hosts the YouTube show and podcast Judging Freedom, where he continues his legal and political commentary independently. The year 2021 proved to be especially turbulent for Napolitano. That August, a Fox News associate named John Fawcett filed a complaint with the network's Human Resources Department alleging misconduct by the judge. According to the complaint, Fawcett claimed that during an encounter at Fox News headquarters, Napolitano made suggestive remarks and touched his arm. Fawcett alleged that when he shared the incident with colleagues, they laughed it off and suggested that such behavior was not unusual. At the time, Fawcett chose not to report the incident formally. Fearing damage to his career as a junior employee, Fawcett had worked as a production assistant on Lou Dobbs' show before moving to an associate producer role on Larry Kudlow's program. In his broader complaint, he also raised allegations against other Fox News figures, including claims of inappropriate comments and discriminatory behavior. Fox News stated that it investigated the allegations against Napolitano promptly and addressed the matter internally, which coincided with the judge's sudden absence from the network in early 2022. A judge dismissed Fawcett's claim against Napolitano, ruling that the alleged conduct did not meet the legal threshold for pervasive harassment and noting that Napolitano was not Fawcett's supervisor. Despite the dismissal, the professional damage had already been done. Fox News permanently severed ties with Napolitano, citing its post-Bill O'Reilly, his zero-tolerance policy regarding workplace conduct. This was not the first controversy to affect Napolitano's standing at Fox News in September 2020. A South Carolina man named Charles Corbishley filed a $10 million lawsuit alleging sexual assault dating back to the late 1980s, when Napolitano was a sitting judge. The lawsuit claimed that Napolitano abused his judicial authority during a criminal case involving Corbishley. Napolitano vehemently denied the allegations, calling them completely false and pure fiction, and stated through his attorney that he welcomed a full investigation. His legal team characterized the lawsuit as outrageous and emphasized the accuser's criminal history. That case, like later claims brought by another individual, remained unresolved for years and further tarnished Napolitano's public image. Regardless of the outcomes, even before these allegations, Napolitano's relationship with Fox News had been strained. In March 2017, sparked international controversy by claiming on air that former President Barack Obama had used British intelligence services to surveil Donald Trump during the 2016 election. The claim was cited by the White House and promptly denied by UK officials as nonsense. Unable to substantiate his sources, Napolitano was suspended by Fox News for nearly 2 weeks. Although he later returned to television, his status within the network had clearly shifted. Once regarded as Fox's authoritative legal voice, he became a figure whose commentary required closer scrutiny. Following his final departure from Fox News, Napolitano reinvented himself as an independent commentator. In July 2022, he launched his YouTube channel Judging Freedom, which quickly attracted a large audience. His first video garnered hundreds of thousands of views, and by January 2026, the channel had grown to hundreds of thousands of subscribers. Free from network oversight, Napolitano embraced an unscripted format focused on constitutional law, civil liberties, government overreach, and presidential power. On his own platform, Napolitano has continued to criticize both Democrats and Republicans, including Donald Trump, whom he has known personally since the 1980s. He has stated openly that he has not voted Republican since 1984, citing his distrust of expansive government power. His critiques of surveillance, military intervention, and executive authority remain central to his message, reflecting the same libertarian principles that once made him both influential and controversial on Fox News. In hindsight, Napolitano's fall from grace at Fox News illustrates how controversy can simultaneously end one chapter of a media career and begin another. While his time at the network ended amid allegations, legal battles, and internal tensions, his independent success demonstrates the growing power of alternative platforms. No longer constrained by editorial filters, Andrew Napolitano has continued to shape his legacy on his own terms, polarizing, outspoken, and firmly committed to his vision of constitutional liberty. From Napolitano's perspective, his departure from Fox News was not merely about allegations or policy violations, but about a fundamental incompatibility between his worldview and the direction the network was taking. Fox News, particularly after the Trump presidency began reshaping its internal dynamics, increasingly favored commentary that aligned with populist conservatism and partisan loyalty. Napolitano, by contrast, remained rigidly committed to libertarian constitutionalism, a philosophy that places limits on executive power regardless of who occupies the Oval Office. That commitment repeatedly put him at odds with Fox management and with the expectations of its core audience. As Donald Trump rose to prominence within conservative media, Napolitano's critiques became more frequent and more pointed. He openly challenged Trump's views on executive authority, immigration enforcement, surveillance, and military intervention. Napolitano argued that many of Trump's actions, such as warrantless surveillance, the expansion of presidential war powers, and aggressive law enforcement tactics, violated the Constitution. These positions were deeply unpopular within a network that was increasingly seen as Trump-friendly. While Fox News continued to host Napolitano on air, insiders later suggested that his appearances were more carefully managed, with producers limiting topics or cutting segments short to avoid internal conflict. Behind the scenes, this friction reportedly created a sense of mistrust. Napolitano was no longer treated as the network's definitive legal authority, but as a liability whose words could trigger backlash, retractions, or diplomatic incidents. As it happened with the 2017 surveillance claims, the combination of ideological divergence and mounting controversies surrounding his personal conduct made his continued presence at Fox News increasingly untenable. By the time the 2021 complaints surfaced, many observers believed the network was already prepared to part ways with him permanently for Fox News. The decision to sever ties was also shaped by its broader corporate history. The network had been rocked by a series of high-profile misconduct scandals over the previous decade, most notably involving Roger L. and Bill O'Reilly. These cases had cost the company hundreds of millions of dollars in settlements and inflicted lasting reputational damage. In response, Fox implemented strict zero-tolerance policies and moved quickly to distance itself from any figure who could expose it to further legal or public relations risk. Even though claims against Napolitano were later dismissed or denied, Fox News appeared unwilling to gamble on another prolonged controversy. Napolitano, however, has consistently maintained that he was never given a meaningful opportunity to clear his name within the network. Supporters argue that Fox News prioritized institutional self-preservation over due process, effectively sacrificing a long-serving contributor to protect the brand. The critics counter that the sheer number of allegations, regardless of legal outcomes, made his continued employment impossible. Either way, his exit marked the end of an era for Fox News, which lost one of its most recognizable and intellectually distinctive voices. Freed from the constraints of cable news, Napolitano found a new audience online. His YouTube channel, Judging Freedom, became a platform where he could speak at length without interruption, address topics mainstream media often avoids, and engage directly with viewers. The show's format, long-form interviews, solo monologues, and in-depth constitutional analysis, stood in sharp contrast to the fast-paced, soundbite-driven nature of cable television. This shift allowed Napolitano to rebuild his image not as a Fox News pundit, but as an independent legal thinker. The success of Judging Freedom also reflects a broader shift in media consumption. Audiences increasingly seek out independent voices they perceive as unfiltered and authentic, especially those disillusioned with corporate media. Napolitano's background as a judge, combined with his willingness to criticize both major political parties, positioned him well within this space. His content often overlaps with viewers who also follow figures like Tucker Carlson and Piers Morgan. yet his tone remains more academic and legalistic. Focusing on constitutional interpretation rather than partisan outrage, Napolitano has framed his post-Fox News career as a liberation. No longer accountable to network executives or advertisers, he has embraced a more uncompromising style of commentary. He regularly challenges U.S. foreign policy, condemns government surveillance programs, and warns against what he sees as creeping authoritarianism. In his view, the Constitution is not a flexible document to be reinterpreted for political convenience, but a strict framework designed to restrain power. That philosophy, he argues, is precisely what made him problematic for Fox News in its later years. Looking back, Napolitano's trajectory illustrates how ideological rigidity can be both a liability and an asset. On cable news, where narratives are often shaped by audience expectations and political alliances, his refusal to conform created friction and ultimately cost him his position. In the independent media landscape, that same refusal has become his defining strength. The story also highlights the changing nature of influence. While Fox News once provided him with unparalleled reach, digital platforms now allow him to command a substantial audience without institutional backing. Andrew Napolitano's fall from grace at Fox News was not caused by a single moment, but by a convergence of factors: controversial claims unresolved allegations, shifting network priorities, and deep ideological differences. His departure underscored how quickly a media career can unravel when trust between a contributor and a network breaks down. Yet it also demonstrated that exile from mainstream media does not necessarily mean irrelevance. Today, Napolitano remains a polarizing figure. To critics, he is a disgraced former judge whose controversies overshadow his legal commentary. To supporters, he is a principled constitutionalist who refused to bend to political pressure and paid the price for it. What is undeniable is that his voice continues to resonate with a significant audience, and his influence, though transformed, has not disappeared. In the end, Andrew Napolitano's story is less about a simple firing and more about the collision between personal ideology and corporate media power. His exit from Fox News closed one chapter of his public life, but it opened another one defined by independence, controversy, and an unwavering belief that liberty must be defended, even when doing so comes at a personal cost. As Napolitano settled into his new role outside the confines of cable news, he began to more openly reflect on what he viewed as the structural problems within modern media. In interviews and on his own program, he suggested that large networks are no longer designed to foster independent legal or philosophical thought, but to reinforce narratives that protect access, ratings, and political alliances. From his perspective, Fox News was not unique in this regard. It was simply the environment in which the tension between his principles and institutional priorities became most visible. He argued that when legal analysis becomes subordinate to political messaging, the public ultimately loses a crucial check on power. This belief has shaped the tone and substance of judging freedom. Unlike his Fox News appearances, which were often limited to brief segments reacting to breaking news, Napolitano now devotes entire episodes to dissecting constitutional questions in detail. He frequently invites guests from across the political spectrum, including academics, former intelligence officials, journalists, and civil liberties advocates. These discussions often revolve around themes that defined his on-air clashes at Fox News: the limits of executive authority, the legality of mass surveillance, the constitutionality of foreign military interventions, and the erosion of due process. In the name of national security, Napolitano's critics argue that his independent platform allows him to avoid accountability and to frame himself as a victim of censorship rather than a figure facing legitimate scrutiny. They contend that by leaving mainstream media, he has insulated himself from rigorous editorial oversight and fact-checking. Supporters counter that cable news itself is rarely neutral, and that Napolitano's move represents a return to long-form, substantive debate rather than a retreat from responsibility. This divide mirrors the broader cultural split over media trust, with audiences increasingly choosing voices that align with their skepticism toward established institutions. Financially and professionally, Napolitano's transition has also been revealing. While Fox News once provided him with a guaranteed national audience and steady income, digital platforms have allowed him to monetize his work directly through subscriptions, donations, and sponsorships. This model reinforces his claim of independence, as he is no longer beholden to a single corporate employer. At the same time, it places him squarely within the emerging creator economy, where credibility is maintained not by institutional affiliation but by audience, loyalty, and perceived authenticity. The legal controversies that shadowed his final years at Fox News, however, have not disappeared entirely from public discussion. For many observers, these allegations remain an indelible part of his story, regardless of legal outcomes. Napolitano has consistently denied wrongdoing and has expressed frustration that accusations, even when dismissed or unresolved, can permanently alter a public figure's reputation. His case illustrates a harsh reality of modern media culture. Once allegations enter the public sphere, their impact often outlasts court rulings or factual clarifications. Fox News, for its part, has rarely spoken about Napolitano since his departure. The network's silence suggests a deliberate effort to move on and to avoid reopening a chapter that was both legally and reputationally fraught. In the years following his exit, Fox has continued to reshape its legal commentary, relying more heavily on rotating contributors rather than a single authoritative figure. This shift reflects a broader trend within cable news, toward flexibility and risk mitigation, minimizing dependence on personalities who could become liabilities. In retrospect, Napolitano's time at Fox News can be seen as a microcosm of the network's own evolution. He joined at a time when Fox was still defining itself as a counterweight to mainstream media, emphasizing debate and ideological diversity within a conservative framework. Over the years, as the network became more tightly intertwined with partisan politics, the space for dissenting conservative or libertarian voices narrowed. Napolitano's unwavering commitment to constitutional limits placed him increasingly outside that space. Despite everything, Napolitano has shown little interest in reconciliation with Fox News or returning to cable television. He has stated repeatedly that he values the freedom he now has to speak without producers in his ear or executives reviewing his talking points. This sentiment resonates with many viewers who feel alienated by the perceived uniformity of cable news discourse. To them, Napolitano represents a throwback to a time when legal analysis was less about political utility and more about principle. His critics, however, warn against romanticizing his independence. They argue that independence does not automatically equate to objectivity and that strong personal ideology can be just as distorting as corporate pressure. Napolitano himself acknowledges this tension, but insists that transparency about one's beliefs is preferable to the pretense of neutrality. In his view, openly declaring a libertarian framework allows audiences to evaluate his arguments more honestly. As the media landscape continues to fragment, Napolitano's post-Fox News career may prove more influential than his years on cable television. While he no longer reaches the millions of casual viewers who once encountered him during primetime news hours, he now engages a more focused and loyal audience. These viewers actively seek out his content, share his analyses, and participate in extended discussions about constitutional law and civil liberties. In an era defined by niche influence rather than mass consensus, this kind of engagement carries its own form of power. Ultimately, Andrew Napolitano's story resists a simple moral or professional conclusion. It is not merely a tale of downfall or redemption, but of transformation. His departure from Fox News was shaped by controversy, ideological conflict, and institutional self-interest. His survival beyond it has been driven by adaptability, conviction, and a willingness to embrace new platforms. Whether one views him as a principled truth-teller or a polarizing figure undone by his own actions depends largely on one's perspective of power, accountability, and the role of media in democratic society. What remains clear is that Napolitano's voice has not faded. It has changed venues, sharpened its tone, and narrowed its audience. But it continues to challenge prevailing narratives about government authority and constitutional limits. In that sense, his journey underscores a broader truth about modern media. Exile from the mainstream is no longer the end of relevance. For figures like Andrew Napolitano, it can mark the beginning of a more autonomous, if contentious, Chapter 1 in which influence is measured not by network logos, but by the loyalty of those still listening. As Napolitano's independent platform matured, it also became clear that his audience was not simply following him out of nostalgia for his Fox News days, but because his commentary filled a vacuum that many viewers felt had grown wider over time. Cable news, once dominated by expert-driven analysis, had increasingly leaned into rapid-fire opinion panels and emotionally charged debates. Napolitano's slower, more methodical style stood in contrast to this trend. He spoke less about political strategy and more about constitutional boundaries. often reminding viewers that legality does not change simply because a policy is popular or a leader is charismatic. This insistence on first principles is central to how Napolitano frames nearly every issue, whether discussing domestic surveillance, foreign wars, or emergency executive powers. He repeatedly returns to the same foundational question: where does the Constitution draw the line? This approach frustrates some viewers who want immediate partisan validation, but it also attracts those who feel that constitutional arguments have been reduced to talking points rather than treated as binding law. In many ways, Napolitano's post-Fox News career is built on resisting that reduction at the same time. His independence has allowed him to revisit subjects that once caused friction at Fox News with far greater candor. He has openly criticized the bipartisan expansion of the national security state, arguing that both Republican and Democratic administrations have normalized practices that would have horrified earlier generations of Americans. He frequently points to the authorization for use of military force passed after 9/11 as a constitutional turning point, one that presidents of both parties have used to justify military actions far removed from its original intent. These arguments echo the same warnings he raised on Fox News, but now they are delivered without time constraints or editorial hedging. Napolitano has also become more reflective about his own career, occasionally acknowledging that his role at Fox News placed him inside a system that limited how far his critiques could go. While he does not disavow his years at the network, he has suggested that cable news, by its nature, discourages sustained dissent from its dominant narrative. A contributor can challenge opponents, he argues, but challenging the underlying assumptions of the audience is far riskier. This, he believes, is where his libertarianism ultimately collided with Fox News' evolving identity. For Fox News viewers who once relied on Napolitano as a trusted legal authority, his absence left a noticeable gap. The network continued to feature legal commentators, but few possessed his combination of judicial experience, media fluency, and philosophical consistency. Some former fans followed him to YouTube, while others remained within the Fox ecosystem, adapting to a more partisan style of legal commentary. This split reflects a broader fragmentation in conservative and right-leaning media, where audiences increasingly choose between ideological affirmation and principled critique. Napolitano's critics often argue that his framing of events is overly absolutist, leaving little room for pragmatic governance in a complex world. They contend that strict constitutionalism, while admirable in theory, can become detached from real-world threats and political realities. Napolitano does not shy away from this criticism. He openly concedes that his views are demanding and often unpopular, but insists that constitutional limits are meant to be inconvenient. In his view, the Constitution exists precisely to restrain government during moments of fear, crisis, or political pressure. The controversies that ended his Fox News career remain a point of contention in evaluating his legacy. For some, they permanently overshadow his contributions as a legal analyst. For others, they represent allegations that, regardless of outcome, were used by a corporation eager to minimize risk. Napolitano himself has expressed deep frustration with how accusations can function as professional death sentences in the media world, even when courts dismiss or fail to substantiate them. His experience has become a case study in how reputations can be irreversibly altered by the mere presence of allegations. Independent of legal resolution, this reality has also influenced how Napolitano approaches public life now. He appears more guarded, more deliberate, and less willing to engage in the kind of casual interactions that once characterized his media persona. While his on-air tone remains confident and assertive, there is an undercurrent of caution shaped by years of scrutiny. In that sense, his independence has come at a personal cost, one that extends beyond professional setbacks. Yet, despite these costs, Napolitano's influence persists in subtler ways. His arguments are frequently cited by other independent commentators, legal scholars, and civil liberties advocates. Clips from Judging Freedom circulate widely on social media, often reaching audiences far beyond his subscriber base. In these spaces, his ideas are debated, challenged, and sometimes adopted, contributing to ongoing conversations about constitutional governance in an era of expanding state power. Napolitano's relationship with the political right remains complex. While many of his viewers lean conservative, he has never fully aligned himself with the modern conservative movement. Its opposition to foreign wars, expansive defense spending, and mass surveillance places him at odds with traditional national security conservatives. At the same time, his skepticism of progressive identity politics and regulatory expansion distances him from the political left. This ideological isolation is both a strength and a limitation, allowing him to critique power broadly but leaving him without a natural political home.